this is the book that I worked on for about 3, 4 years, and I wasn't quite sure which direction I would take with this book. But it ended up being this title, Cyber Weapons of Mass Psychological Destruction and the People Who Use Them. That title actually came from another couple of colleagues, one of whom has actually spoken at a event of your chamber a couple of years ago. So if you look down here, this is a book called Weapons of Mass Psychological Destruction. This was two of my colleagues, Colonel Larry James and Terry Orsley. They spoke, I don't know, Anne, if you remember, 3 years, maybe 4 years, something. So I worked with them on weapons of mass destruction and the harm it causes in terms of the psychology of individuals and just the social harm that is created by the threat of weapons of mass destruction. One of the chapters in that book which I looked at was around social media, around cyber techniques, around cyber warfare, around things like the examples that I shared with you before. And so I developed that. I thought this is really where I would like to focus on, because what I find is it isn't just about cyber means and financial losses. It isn't about that. It isn't about just loss of data. It's a lot more about the psychological harm that gets created in individuals, in organizations, in society in general, in many different ways. That's what affects us every day when incidents in the cyber domain come out in the press and we hear about them. Some of it is just so personal. Loss of data, loss of control. This individual who's not a ward of the state, complete loss of control over their own life. We look at it, yes, it doesn't affect us, but imagine being in that situation. So a lot of my thought process was, who is this directed against? Why? How? What kind of an impact does it create? So I also started to then blog about these kinds of things, and I'm going to move one of the screens over so on my website I do a lot of blogs about exactly the kind of incidents that I've described. I look at disinformation, I look at information distortion, I look at how these things affect groups of people, influence actions, influence people to believe certain things. So I've done several of these blogs, and I have a bunch of others which are coming out. This particular one around COVID-19 was just an amazing incident that I investigated, I looked at, where ISIS and Al-Qaeda were using COVID to really bump up their enrollments and say, this is what's being caused by the United States and its allies, and we've got to come together. I mean, it's just the distortion of information by cyber means is all over the world. I mean, it's just today you're going to see examples from Asia, from the United States, from other countries, that this type of disinformation, this type of distortion is just, it almost feels like it has reached an explosive point where it is starting to affect societies and democracies and all of us in general. So this is one of the places where as I come up with ways to look at these things, I absolutely post them here. And if you'll send me a list, I'll send a signed copy of the book to the people who are in the session today. I would love to do that. So let me move back to my slides then. So my thought was, where does this world of cybersecurity and psychological harm, where does it intersect? And for me, it intersected in many different places. Okay? There was an incident that I followed very closely, and this was an incident that took place in um, um, let me see, January 14th of 2018, and you would be aware of this incident. January 14th, 2018, 8:07 a.m. There was a time period of 37 minutes in the island of Hawaii when a message was sent out on cell phones and through the airwaves that there was a impending ballistic missile attack on that island. And I was watching TV in the morning, and all of a sudden I see this, and for about a minute I thought, this has got to be a joke. This got to be, and then I realized, no, this is being broadcast, even though that correction came a few minutes later. But for many people on that island, they didn't see that correction. What they saw was 37 minutes of fear. And they were being told this is not a drill. While today we know this was an error, but just imagine the terror for those citizens, for 37 people. So I took a few moments and I looked at what kind of text messages were being sent in that 37 minutes. And it is an eye-opener. People who had accepted for those 37 minutes that this was going to be the last day of their lives, sending best wishes and sending love to their relatives at home and saying, pray for us. So 37 minutes of terror, okay? And the thought that crossed my mind is, now we know this was an accident. Now we know it was somebody's fault. But what if this was a cyber break-in and somebody created this? That kind of stuff has happened before. It's happened multiple times when incidents like that have happened elsewhere by somebody breaking in and creating havoc just like this. The year before, in 2017, April 8th, there was an incident in the city of Dallas. Midnight, a hacker got into the city's emergency sirens. And all of a sudden, for 12 minutes, every siren in the city was blaring that there was a tornado in the region. There was no tornado in the region. Nothing was happening in that region. There wasn't even a storm. There wasn't even wind, right? But for those 12 minutes, imagine waking up in the middle of the night with every siren blaring and thinking, we don't know what's going on. There's nothing on television. Nothing's happening. So for those 12 minutes, and that was a hacker-created incident. So when I think about psychological harm, like these individuals, some of them have had long-lasting impacts from this incident in Hawaii even today. PTSD is a incident, is an effect that lasts a long time from severe incidents like this. Many of them are still reporting on effects they continue to have from incidents like this. Our endurance and our acceptance of this goes up every time there is an incident. But every one of these is something that we got to take a look at and see, this is a potential psychological harm to us. And there are other ways this thing happens. This is just one example. And I'll go to the other extreme. There are examples in our corporate life that happen every day that causes organizations to pause and ask, what is the harm out of this being caused to us? So on the other extreme, I'm going to take an example from one of our clients that we do a little bit of work for. We help them. And I deliberately called it, why did Stacy email Anita's husband? Stacy and Anita both work in the same organization, and I know them, I know them well. The reason for this slide being there is you'll see the effect this has on an organization to pause its operations and say, did we lose something? What happened? So Stacy gets an email, one of, and I'm sure your organization and everybody else gets these every day, every other day, thousands of them which come in. This one came to her from Keith, somebody who she knows and works with every day. The subject, of course, is known to her because she has worked on this topic with Keith for the last 3 days. And it says, here is a scanned invoice. Did we pay this already? If not, do we need to pay it today? Very respectfully, Keith. So think about this. She knows Keith. She's been working on this topic for the last 3 days. She gets an email. What's her natural tendency? She's going to open this, right? And she does. And all of a sudden, she gets into a OneDrive folder to download an invoice that she's supposed to pay today. And she opens that. And the next thing, every contact of hers is getting this email. This is classic spamware, classic malware, classic ways by which these kind of scams work. And I am on their mailing list. I got this and I thought, oops, they've been spammed again. Okay. And this is an organization which is well protected with Barracuda firewalls and other things, and yet these slip through. Not only people in the organization were getting this, but Anita's husband, who doesn't work in that organization, is getting it too. I don't work directly for that organization. I am getting it too. So we tracked this specific email to see where is it leading, where is the command and control center, and we tracked it to a website in Utah that had been created 3 days ago. Its address was very similar to Path administrators, and so it was easy for somebody to confuse it with a legitimate site. And we tracked what it was doing. It was just collecting contacts. It was collecting passwords. And then before we could investigate the rest of it, the website disappeared. So we reported it to the FBI and did our job and changed all the passwords. But the impact is for that day, that organization stops and thinks, we have a lot of data which has PHI information. It has personnel information, it has credit card information, it has medical information. Did we lose anything? And if we did, what is the incident response? Fortunately for this organization, it was, whoever these guys were, we think we have a little bit of a handle on where the data went. They were just collecting emails and passwords to presumably come back later to get to other pieces of information. But for about 6-7 hours, this organization paused, stopped its regular operations to think about, what did we lose? What did we not lose? Is there any ill effect from, is there something else embedded in our systems because of this? And despite all the scans that we did, despite all the, can I be 100% sure that we didn't miss something from this attack? I can't be 100% sure. I mean, now with the passage of time, I know we are okay. And so we've taken steps to stop this kind of things happening, but every once in a while, one slips in, one slips in. And all it takes is one person not on their 100% game day, and something gets clicked, and off this goes again, right? It may not have caused any monetary harm, it may not have caused any other harm, but think about the stress it puts every C-level person, everybody else, to think about what happened, why did it happen, and work our way backwards. Work stops. So I put this in the same league as other incidents that happen. So, it's this stuff happens every day. And we should know better. We should be doing a better job at closing these kind of things. And one of the things you'll notice is familiarity. Stacy may not have ever opened this mail had it not come from Keith talking about path administrators. If it was just somebody that says, oh, here is a 10% coupon from Target, she would probably have just deleted it right away, right? But this is familiarity. This is the person. How do they do this? How do they get this? Because, it's every incident like this builds on itself. And had it not been for this, and one of the common threads you'll find across a lot of these incidents is that familiarity of where this email is coming from, where this thing is coming from, often leads to incidents like this. And you'll see that repeated thread running through. So as I think about how far we have come in terms of cyber exploits through a period of time, we have, it's easy to sometimes just take incident after incident. Oh yeah, this happened. My data is stolen, and my data is stolen again. Oh, my data is stolen again. And then we think, well, my data has been stolen 100 times. So what's the big deal? The big deal really is, if I look at, so I took these exploits and I said, they are fundamentally and creatively different. They started when the first incidents were there. I put them into this league of, cyber annoyances. They annoyed people, but it wasn't like they were out to hold you at ransom for give us this much money and we give you. It wasn't like that. It was just experimentation that got out of hand, so to speak. Okay, but then they started to take a little bit more of a turn, and I call that sort of that genre, that time period, cyber mafia. And then we've taken another wild turn towards cyber warfare, where it's not just hackers against other people, but it's nation states versus nation states. And that world has changed dramatically. Okay. So I'm going to take a look at these three and give you just a couple of examples of why these are so fundamentally different. And also what it just tells you is that what we are looking at ahead is, I'm sorry, did somebody have a question? I'm sorry if I can pause. No. Sorry, I thought somebody had a question. Okay. And where we are headed to next is just, is an open book, because once you get past these, they just, every turn, every step has been worse than before. So these are what I called, cyber annoyances, but then I realized they have been more than just cyber annoyances, but I'll tell you what I mean by them, okay? The first slide that you see here, Melissa virus, this was one of the early stages where I think people were just experimenting and seeing what we can do. Oh, can we do this? Oh, let's try it. This was in 1999 when a IT technician and a part-time faculty member in New York, his name was David Smith, and he was down in Miami on a holiday visit. And as the story goes, right or wrong, he met a stripper called Melissa. And out of that incident came a virus called Melissa. Melissa was nothing more than malware like the one that I showed you in that one example. You open that file, you open that attachment that comes to you, it infects your Word documents, it picks up the first 50 contacts out of your Outlook, and it mails out this letter that says, here is the documents that you requested, and this document sometimes I've named this, and sometimes it'll tell you, don't show this to somebody. These are the passwords of 500 porn sites. And it will always be from somebody that you know. So think about familiarity, and people open this stuff, and the next thing you know, the next 50 emails have gone out, and the next 50 emails go out, and the next 50 emails go out. It's not designed to hurt your systems, but as a consequence of this traffic, the whole internet stopped for 3 days. This happened on a Friday. So it was a little bit easier for companies to deal with this through the weekend. But once all of this was said and done, it took $591,000 of effort to stop this, what David Smith said is an innocent experiment. And that's what he said in court. He said, I didn't know this was going to happen. I just created this and off it went, and then I couldn't stop it, right? So that was the first generation of people who are trying to do, they'll do copycat stuff. So Melissa never completely went away. It got reflected in other viruses like the ones that you see here at the bottom. The first one is something called Zero Access. It started to get into computers and show you websites that you didn't want to see. You did a search on find me a book of psychology, it would show you a website of something else. And what they were doing is they were collecting pennies from the website owners who paid for advertising. And as a consequence of getting into millions of computers, they made about $100,000 a day by showing you websites and collecting money from advertisers. That's what they were doing. So it was easy for you to get rid of it once you saw it. But before all of it was said and done, it caused a lot of harm to corporate work and everyday work. Same thing with this, with the sapphire worm that you see at the bottom right. It created havoc among internet users, interconnected machines, and users to stop corporate work. It wasn't designed to be malicious in the sense of I'm stealing your data or I'm going to collect money from you. It was just, it was really what started out possibly as, can we do this? Or we saw somebody else do it. Let me take a variant and let me try to do it. That's what this generation of malware and cyber attacks did. Okay. Then it took a sudden awful turn. This was, hopefully none of you have had your companies attacked by things like this, but I'm sure you get these emails all day long. But hopefully none of your people click on those links. One of our close friends here in the Dayton area, who runs a small business contacted me one morning, and he said, this is the screen I'm seeing, exactly the screen that I'm showing you on the PowerPoint slide. This is a Cryptolocker virus that overtook his server, just like it did millions of other computers around the country. And what this specific virus does and did was that it takes over your machine, it takes your data, it encrypts it so that you can access it. Then it will show you a message that says, we want you to pay so many Bitcoins, and then we'll send you a key to decrypt your data so that you can use it again. So now you have two choices. Either you're going to pay these people, or if you have other mechanisms to restore your data, you're going to restore it from there. And this gentleman, like every good business person, he contacted the police, he contacted the FBI, he went through all those channels and finally decided, if I'm going to go back into business, I better pay these people. So at that time, he paid them 19 Bitcoins. And I thought, okay, that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you add these up over millions of people, it becomes a lot of money. So there was one one malware company that traced 4 Bitcoin addresses and showed that just those 3 addresses had taken in 41,000 Bitcoins, which in 2013 amounted to $27 million. Just four of these. There could be 400, right? So what we see individually as 19 Bitcoins, you add them up, and so I don't know how stressed he was, but I was looking at this and there was nothing but anger at, oh, I am a small business just like many others. And if I had to go through this, I mean, I would be completely stopped in my business for so many days. And that's the tragedy of all of this. And so this is the sort of the time period where I call, the cyber mafia. They have the techniques, they have the tools to hold you at ransom. They really do. And that's what they have shown us time and time and time again. Okay. You're all familiar with the Equifax famous hack that cost 143 million credit account holders to lose their data. And the 143 million was the first estimate. None of us are Equifax customers. None of us signed up to have service with them, but yet we find ourselves with our data being held by the 3 major credit card companies. Okay, not by choice, but that's by, that's the construction of that industry. So somebody got into the Equifax systems in 2017, stayed there for 76 days before they were detected. And in those 76 days, they had their time with the databases, got into credit card information, yours, mine's, everybody's. Chances are every one of us was in that database. We lost our PII, personally identifiable information. Then they started to get into other pieces of information, other subsidiaries of Equifax. And in the end, after 76 days, they were able to get data from 51 different databases, little by little, before they were detected. Okay. The net result of this was, there were financial settlements by Equifax, which was $425 million. There were $175 million in fines that Equifax paid to different states. There was another $100 million that they paid to the CFPB. And this doesn't take into account the money that you and I as individuals spent on rectifying this, because we lost our data because of somebody else's fault, even though we didn't choose to get service from them, right? And the story just gets worse when you think about other kinds of incidents that happened within one corporate environment. And we should just look at Equifax just as an example. This is just things that we should know, because we have to avoid stuff like this ourselves, right? This incident had a lot of painful and a long, painful cyber tale to it. It just didn't end with that incident, okay? There were other incidents that came to life. Right as that incident was happening, their president apparently sold 4,000 shares. Whether he knew this was going to come to light and the Equifax stock price was going to fall down, nobody knows. Right after that, their CFO sold 6,500 shares. Their president of workforce solutions sold more stock in the company. And then the incident got worse. The hackers not only got into their US systems, but Argentina, Canada, additional names, UK. And they just, with every incident, with every discovery, more and more people discovered they had lost their data. And out of that first piece that I showed you, well, their CIO was charged with insider trading because he sold all his stock while he was in that 76-day period when they first discovered that there was something going on, and they had to release that information and their stock price was going to fall. So they got charged with insider trading. So what you have is cyber, you have insider trading, you have loss of data, you have an impact on all of us that is amazing. Their chairman and CEO got on television and said, there's been no compromise on the commercial credit reporting databases, which was completely wrong. Every one of their commercial credit reporting databases was compromised. But yet this gentleman got on national television and said, no, that's not happened. Then they said, okay, we are going to create a website that you can go to and get information whether your data has been compromised or not. That website refused to work. That website was getting blocked because it was being treated as spam. When people could get on their on that website, which was put by Equifax, it had all kinds of garbage data. Here is one of the comments that came from one of the members who said, my boss just entered a fake name with his 9-year-old son's social security number, and the site said it was affected. Just garbage upon garbage was the outcome of this. They gave you pins when you filed the complaint. That pin was a combination of the date and the time at which you created that report. Anybody could hack that. It was just so obvious that people were putting this online and said, Equifax, stop doing this stuff. Stop treating our data like as if you don't care about our data. Then, of course, they went out and said, okay, we will give you, let me go to the next slide, that we will give you a monitoring and identity theft protection package. But if you accept that, you also agree that you won't sue us for the loss of your data. So, what I'm showing you is technical incidents coupled with how the response happens creates worse and worse and worse environment. And in the end, what you realize is that the people who pay the damages for all of this are us. Collectively, Americans spent $1.4 billion on credit freezes in response to the Equifax breach. And that is what is amazing in all of this. We may not realize this, but it is amazing. Okay. Hopefully, every one of you has their credit frozen with all 3 credit bureaus, which is a good practice. But every time you have to unfreeze it and freeze it. Some of them charge you money, some of them don't charge you money, but you got to keep all of that in your mind. And you got to do this because of an incident and because of that response and because of what it means for all of us to be able to see this happen. I remember that incident. I remember that day very well. All I kept thinking was, well, what am I supposed to do? I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. I just, like everybody else, I'm Googling and thinking, I couldn't get to anybody at any of the at Equifax. All we got was voicemails. You send them an email, you never get a response. You do Google, nobody has a clear answer. And you just sit there, and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I said, there's nothing I can do. I just waited and see, right? That's the harm that it causes to us as individuals, as customers, to companies, okay? So the whole purpose of writing this book, of thinking about this book, was get to that point where we look at this not in just terms of technical incidents and cyber incidents, but how much harm does it cause to people, okay? And I'm also watching time, and I think I'm going to go a few minutes over. I had intended to stop about 11:40, but I might take another 5 minutes or so. So if that's okay. Um, all the cyber incidents took an even more sinister turn along the way. And I want to share with you, and I don't know if you've read about some of these incidents, these boxes that are on the screen, Stuxnet, Havex, Energetic Bear, Dragonfly. They look like comic book names, but they are really serious events, right? The most well-known of these was this first piece, Stuxnet. So what I'm going to show you now, and I'll tell you why this was a turning point in my review of where cyber incidents are. See, everything that I've talked to you about so far has been purely online. People break in, they steal your data. People stop your machines from working. These worms freeze up the internet because they're causing so much traffic, right? It's self-contained in that online world, right? For the first time, we started to see, and this is what's on this screen, that online world sort of leaking into and touching the more physical space of our lives, okay? Stuxnet was the first example, and the example that I hold up in every one of these incidents, because this was the turning point. So Stuxnet, and there is even a documentary, which is even right now on HBO, it'll play every night, was considered to be a code name, or its code name was supposed to be Olympic Games, if the press is correct. And it was a designed malware by the United States and the Israeli army to somehow detect where Iran's nuclear facilities were. So that was in that time period of 2005 to 2010, okay? And this wonderful creation called Stuxnet started to infiltrate and get into the Iranian Windows servers and machines. What it was looking for was a very specific type of a machine connected to that server. Okay, it was looking for a Siemens enrichment machine, a centrifuge, and if it didn't find it, it just moved on to the other machine. These machines are networked. It just kept moving on. It kept moving on for years, till it found them, till it found the specific machines which were linked to a specific type of equipment which was used to enrich uranium. Okay. The satellites, all our satellite machinery didn't know where exactly they were, but this malware found them. And then it did an amazing thing. It wasn't designed to blow up the centrifuges. It played a longer game. It started to speed up the centrifuges for a few minutes. It started to slow down the centrifuges for a few minutes. Slow down, speed up, slow down, speed up, slow down, speed up, right? It was designed to look like these were quality issues with the centrifuges and stop Iran from enriching at a rate where it needed that uranium. They never did, only because of Stuxnet. And they just started to replace these centrifuges over and over and over, thinking it was a quality issue with the centrifuges. They were not manufactured to that quality. They just didn't know for the longest time that this was being caused by Stuxnet, and eventually Stuxnet was discovered and it was taken out of the systems, but not before. From all the reviews that we've seen, not before it made a major dent into that country's enrichment program. Okay? Looking at it, it was absolutely amazing. You know, every one of these centrifuges has an operator who looks at the centrifuge to see if it's operating properly. This virus was so unique that it actually sent made up images to the operator so that the operator would see data that says everything is working just fine when the centrifuges were not. It just replayed that film of everything going well over and over and over. So that's where the malware world, the cyber world, touched the physical world. It could have done any amount of harm, any amount of harm. Okay? That was the Stuxnet story. And unfortunately, after it was discovered, people said, oh, now we know the code. Now we know how to do this. We are going to make variants of it. And they did. The bigger variant of this was a piece of malware called Havex, which was deployed by two Russian groups, one nicknamed the Energetic Bear, and also lovingly called Dragonfly. Some people called it this, some people called it that. They took all the Stuxnet code, they modified it to their own use, called it Havex, and they deployed it all over the United States with different plans. So for example, here, I particularly like this example. The Ohio nuclear power plant was infected just like this by the slammer worm, which is nothing but a variant of Stuxnet and Havex, and this was in 2003. They deployed it from 2001 all the way to 2005 all over the world, trying to determine if they could use the same code, same procedure, same tactics to get into industrial plants, to get into utilities, to get into nuclear power plants, to get into water treatment plants, to get into waste treatment plants. Every one of these is computer driven. Every one of them has PLCs. Every one of them has machinery that is controlled by other systems. If they can do that, then war just simply means cyber war. It is not going, you know, somebody in one of the presentations, somebody said the next major war is going to be a cyber war and not a kinetic war. And you see all the signs for it. You see all the signs. If they, whoever they is, and we can get into the world's industrial infrastructure, the industrial infrastructure can be brought to a halt at the press of a button. That's where this gets dangerous beyond just stealing data and theft of data and theft of credit card information. It just makes the theft of a credit card information feel so trivial, because you see the consequences of something like this are absolutely and totally devastating to a society. And there are hundreds of other examples where things like this have affected different countries. And then, of course, there was Cyber War 2, and I'll just maybe spend a few minutes on this because I want you to see this next turn. Without getting into any of the, I just want you to see this shift. And this shift was not about industrial systems. This shift was about people. This shift was, how do we take cyber means, especially social media, and start to affect people's beliefs, actions, judgments. And the next few slides are really about, I've spent a lot of time from the 2016 election to now to look at how messaging and propaganda using technology has really created a shift in society at the same scale as Stuxnet did to the world of infrastructure. One of my favorite books on propaganda was in 1928 by Edward Bernays, who his most famous campaign, it was in the early 20s, 1929. He worked for one of the cigarette companies and built this wonderful propaganda campaign to get the female population smoking by branding cigarettes as feminists. This was 1929. And he wrote this book. And he said, propaganda can be anything. It could be, it influences people, it makes people believe what they would otherwise not believe. And it's the art of making people act on that belief. And we can do that by imaging, by messaging, by changing what we say, by portraying information in a certain way. And I saw threads of that running all through our society since the last 8 years now. The only reason I show you this is there was a remarkable push towards micro-targeting people with messaging in our political environment since 2016. It wasn't one political party, it wasn't one group, it was all over the spectrum of our society. Micro-targeting as in individuals. What do you believe in? What is more important to you? And I am going to send you a message like that. Just like other investigators, I collected lots and lots of information to see how this is being done. And it is amazing how it was done. If on Facebook somebody liked the concept of patriotism during elections, they would get campaigns like this. And I'm going to break this up into its little pieces. It'll look like it's a legitimate group. This one was one of the favorite advertising pages that went out in the 2016 elections. It looks like it's a legitimate group. It's not. There will be messaging that'll say it's an ad, but we'll probably all miss it. It will have divisive language. It will have things like omitted indefinite articles that tells you where it is coming from. These are markers and footprints of who created this and where it's coming from. They will always have an authentic looking logo like this, okay? How do they work? They really create a outrage and a fear through precision targeting. I mean, they became so good at doing this that it was absolutely amazing. And this was the first time this was being done. So what we saw in the industrial age with targeting of a specific PLC, I thought we are seeing this targeting individuals, same concept, same ideas. And we saw that if you identified as a Christian conservative, this was 90% of the time, this was an ad that was sent your way. If you identified as a Southern conservative, here was an ad that went out to you. There is hundreds of these examples. I mean, congressional studies, the Senate investigators, all through. But I went out and I looked for many of these things and I did correlations between them. If you were identified as an LGBT supporter, this was an ad that came your way. If you identified as somebody who likes Muslims of America, here is an ad that came your way. And you think, well, how do these people know? I mean, they almost look like mind readers. They know exactly what you think, what you like, and here it is, okay? But the important thing to me was, where is it coming from? This isn't just made up stuff, right? There has got to be a science behind this. The science behind that comes from something called cognitive biases. This is an age-old sort of field of study. It started as early as the 1970s when psychologists and psychiatrists started to look at the mind and think about how does the mind make decisions. And in that process, they came up with this science of cognitive biases. And I'm going to fast forward these just a little bit because I'm running out of time. But it was, it was, the mind is, we think of ourselves as rational. We are not. Our mind is not rational. We make decisions, we process information based on a lot of biases. In the end, what they realized is that left to your own devices, the human mind will make decisions based on a lot of biases. And this is, you can't read this, but this is all the biases that our mind works on and makes decisions on. Where it intersects social media is, this is the important slide, right? When people realize how we interpret information, we get sent information that frames a certain piece of information in a certain way, that primes us to take some actions. It creates confirmation bias. We have a tendency to search for conforming information. It creates an echo chamber. You know, we just like to be with that group that supports our ideas, our vision, the way we look at information. And social media has become so good at this. And people who manipulate information have become so good at it that one of the consequences was this study, which was done by the Pew Research, by the Pew Group, who looked at the split of the national population, people who identified themselves with one political party or the other or somewhere in the middle. In 1994, that group, there was a very strong middle group, which polarized and polarized and polarized to a point where the 2017 numbers look like this. And part of the reason why it happened is because of things like this, that social media information started to create so much of this echo chamber and confirmation bias and loss aversion, that all those cognitive biases started to get to this. And this is exactly what we saw. And I'm going to, this is not stopped, right? Some of these ads I collected, some of these social media pages I collected after the George Floyd incident. And so somebody would send out messaging to Facebook that described how our country is descending into a police state. And the exact opposite was happening on the other side, where it was, this is how to stop it. So this exploitation of differences in how we perceive information and what information we are getting and by whom and how is it being framed was as much a cyber weapon as any other. And its impact is on society even today. Okay, even today, if you step into social media and look at this, what am I getting? What did I do to get this? It's almost like serving ads to you. You just have to be in the vicinity of a store and Facebook will fill you with ads of that store. And this is exactly like that. You express one opinion and somebody, a series of bots and algorithms will then start to prime you with whatever it thinks that you are thinking, and all designed to change your views, to support your views, and to build you your own echo chamber. This is even more devastating to society today than any of the others. So in the end, I'm going to skip this too. I'm running out of time a little bit. But we have a pathway to a response. We have a pathway to a response which is individual and which is corporate. As individuals, we need to be aware of the stuff that we are seeing, that it affects our lives, it affects our decision making. and develop a little bit of objectivity. At a corporate level, cybersecurity has to become more of a board level topic. We have to build cybersecurity alliances that alert us to what is happening, invest in cyber awareness, incident response. We got to monitor, audit, comply, and just have a person dedicated to security in your organization. Okay, there are so many other things that we can do, but awareness is the really big piece of how we can stop cyber wars, cyber incidents, cyber biases, and the headings of which we are taking. And this incidents are being written every day. So I'll stop here and see if you guys have any questions, comments, anything you want to discuss. And I'm sorry I've taken more of your time than I intended.
Well, Vikram, thank you on behalf of the chamber. It was very interesting. Certainly appreciate you sharing the insights. I actually was going to have a question on the, what should our response be? And it sounds like you summed it up there by saying a strong defense is the best offense here, I guess. So
it really is. I mean, these guys are learning so fast that they are going beyond our ability to defend meaningfully, but we can't give up. I mean, some of us are, small organizations will typically say, well, we can't afford this. But yes, I mean, afford just means different things for different people. You just have to have the willingness and the awareness that this stuff affects every organization, large, small, medium, 1-person shop, 10-person shop.